The US and China have struck at Russia. Trump and Xi have staged a geopolitical upheaval. After a 6-year pause, the US and China have joined forces and thrown Putin overboard from world politics. Trump lowered tariffs, called Xi a great leader, and declared, "We will work together on Ukraine." Watch the explosive details right now.
Donald Trump met with Xi Jinping in South Korea as part of his Indo-Pacific tour. The main topics of the meeting were trade barriers between the countries and, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war.
They moved towards establishing a more forward-looking joint political dialogue agenda, which in principle is a very positive outcome of this meeting.
As a result of the meeting, the parties agreed to reduce the tariff on Chinese goods related to fentanyl, a synthetic opioid analgesic, from 20% to 10%. The overall level of U.S. duties will reach up to 47%.
The fundamental issues underlying the conflict between the US and China have not gone anywhere. And these are very important questions, such as the fate of the island of Taiwan and the possibility of imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, specifically because of the purchase of Russian oil. Well, Trump said that these issues were not raised diplomatically, but in such cases, as a rule, when you don't reach an agreement, you don't reach an agreement. You just say that we didn't talk about it.
The agreements regarding Ukraine were less productive. Despite the fact that, according to the US president, Ukraine was discussed at length, initially Trump wanted to persuade Xi to reduce support for Russia so that Putin would agree to end the war. It was not announced whether the parties reached any agreement in this regard.
A strategic dialogue of cooperation has been established between authoritarian Russia and authoritarian Beijing. And to risk that, Xi, in return, would have to receive something more substantial and significant, something that would match the high level of relations between America and Beijing. Since, at least for the time being, the relationship is more reminiscent of a logic of de-escalatory actions in the trade and economic sphere. I would not say that at this particular moment between Washington and Beijing. A strategic alliance or dialogue has been established.
Donald Trump rated the meeting a 12 out of 10. By the way, this was the first meeting between the leaders of the US and China in the past 6 years.
Based on the statements we've seen, it looks like tariffs won't be imposed on Chinese goods, and there will be access for American agricultural products. On the surface, the statement sounds good. But how true that really is, again, we remember President Trump's experience, at least. Trump's statement that peace had been achieved in the Middle East after 3,000 years. I'm someone who reads news from the Middle East, and what's happening there doesn't even come close to reminding me of peace being achieved in that region. So, Trump's statement that everything has been agreed with China sounds great, but let's at least wait 48 hours and see what happens.
Trump said that he had agreed with Xi Jinping on a visit to China in the spring of next year. After that, a return visit by the Chinese leader to the US will follow.
Finland is deploying troops at the border with Russia. There's panic in Russia, hysteria in the Kremlin. The authorities are creating people's militias. The Kremlin is trembling while the Finnish army is flexing its muscles. 15,000 soldiers, tanks, and artillery. Everything is ready for large-scale exercises right next to Russia. Will there be a response from Putin? We'll tell you right now.
Acting proactively, Finland is deploying 15,000 troops to the border with Russia. The Finns are preparing for the largest series of military exercises of the year. Conscripts, reservists, professional soldiers, as well as units from allied countries Sweden and the United Kingdom will take part. According to the country's ground forces, the purpose of the maneuvers is to test the army's readiness to defend the state and to strengthen cooperation with NATO allies.
This is NATO's response to the aggressive actions of the occupying country. On the territory of the occupying country, directly near Finland's borders, there is currently intensive engineering construction of new military bases by the occupying country's army. This refers to Petrozavodsk, Kandalaksha, and other settlements on the territory of the Russian Federation, which indicate the redeployment of Russian army units directly near Finland's borders.
One of the largest episodes will be the Liverlace Sentry exercise, which will take place in southern Finland starting November 27th until December 4th. About 7,000 participants will be involved in it.
The Russian Federation has constantly made it clear to Finland what threat hangs over that country. Moreover, there has been a constant element of military political pressure on Finland with the aim, accordingly, of maintaining so-called neutral status. There is not the slightest reason to say that friendly, good neighborly relations were established after the occupation of Finnish lands. The Russian military presence near Finland's borders has been constantly increasing.
In the spring of 2023, Finland became a member of the North Atlantic Alliance. This provoked a sharp reaction from Russia, worsening bilateral relations. In addition, Finland imposed sanctions against Russia and refused to grant asylum to Russians fleeing mobilization. After that, Putin's lackeys began blaming the Finns for every sin at every opportunity. For example, in September, former ALCO president Dmitry Medvedev decided that Finland was preparing to attack Russia.
After joining NATO under the guise of defensive measures, Helsinki is pursuing a confrontational course, preparing for war with Russia, apparently setting up a springboard for an attack on us.
Moreover, according to him, Russia supposedly legally deserves reparations from the Finns for World War II. He claims that back then the Finns paid far too little thanks to the goodwill of the Russians.
This is precisely an element of diplomatic and military pressure on Finland. Moreover, similar statements are being made not only regarding Finland but also accordingly regarding Sweden, specifically about the island of Gotland, and likewise regarding Poland.
Following the alcoholic Medvedev, the chairman of the State Duma Defense Committee, Andrei Kartapolov, also made aggressive statements. He declared, or rather threatened, that Russia is ready to defend itself at any moment since they have everything they need. Medvedev had previously spoken about this as well.
We cannot simply ignore the fact that Finland is currently a member of the North Atlantic Alliance, also known as NATO. This situation predetermines changes in our military approaches, in the arrangement of the border and in repelling possible unfriendly acts.
The political and military leaders of Finland are doing everything they can to emphasize that an attack by Russia would be an act of suicidal madness.
The Russian Federation is demonstrating its readiness for a direct confrontation with the NATO bloc, and accordingly the first countries that will be in the spotlight. The armies of the occupying country, namely Finland and the Baltic states, are therefore at significant risk. This is also evidenced by the formation of new military units in the Leningrad military district, and accordingly the deployment of military infrastructure directly near the borders with Finland.
Earlier, it became known that Finland had proposed to NATO to establish a new military base on its territory. Helsinki could become a base for large NATO reconnaissance drones.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Urgent. Pokrovsk is holding. The legendary city where Russian troops have broken. The armed forces of Ukraine are doing the impossible. The occupying army is drowning in blood. The city is holding strong. The enemy has been reduced to dust. Donbas is turning into a bloody trap for the enemy. Watch all the fiery details right now.
The battles for Pokrovsk have been raging for over a year. During this time, the occupying army has broken all its teeth but still hasn't taken the city. It's just a stone's throw from here to the end of the southern border of Donetsk region. The Pokrovsk direction is a priority for Putin. He has transferred 120,000 soldiers of his occupying army here.
In the Pokrovsk direction, the occupiers have changed their tactics of conducting combat operations. We're talking about the use of mechanized columns in assaults on the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. Such tactics have not been observed for the past several months, up to half a year. Notably, the change in tactics is primarily related to changes in weather conditions. In other words, the occupiers are counting on the rainy autumn weather to significantly reduce the activity of Ukrainian FPV drones.
Since August of this year, Ukraine's defense forces have not only managed to protect Pokrovsk and the nearby settlements, Ukrainian defenders have liberated almost 183 square
kilometers of territory and cleared another 230 square kilometers of the enemy. At present, there are no grounds to claim full control over the Pokrovsk agglomeration.
In addition, Ukrainian fighters have neutralized at least 13,945 Russian invaders. Of these, 8,402 are irrecoverable losses, 5,419 wounded, and 124 taken prisoner. The occupiers have also lost nearly 1,300 pieces of equipment and weaponry. That
is, we are talking about the use of the so-called no price is too high tactic. The occupiers are well aware that out of all that armored equipment, not just tanks but also IFVs, APCs, at most only up to 20% will actually reach the positions of Ukraine's defense forces. and accordingly the same proportion applies to the landing troops, meaning manpower. The occupiers use this tactic primarily to achieve political objectives. It's not even about the military aspect. The Russian dictator needs to demonstrate to the United States the supposed tactical successes of the occupying army before the start of negotiations in Hungary.
Despite losses and the shortage of personnel, a few days ago an enemy sabotage and reconnaissance group managed to infiltrate the center of Pokrovsk. Local social media channels report that during their advance, the Russians violated international humanitarian law and killed civilian residents of the city. This happened in the area of the railway station. One woman was miraculously saved by a local resident. Unfortunately, the occupiers are increasingly using the residents of Pokrovsk as human shields, or they simply shoot unarmed people right on the streets of their own city. Nevertheless, Ukrainians are holding the defense with dignity and destroying the enemy even as they approach Pokrovsk. In this video, the defenders of Pokrovsk used a single FPV drone to neutralize 10 occupiers at once who were moving at night in a truck near Selidov. The enemy continues to target weak spots and probe Ukrainian defenses. In Mirnohrad-Pokrovsk district, a small group of occupiers broke into the city, but was immediately eliminated by the Ukrainian armed forces.
The difficulty in neutralizing Russian sabotage groups lies in the fact that they use a urban infrastructure and B, the local population as a human shield. This is what creates additional problems for Ukraine's defense forces at the moment of neutralizing the Russian assault troops. But it should be noted that according to the Russian side itself, the average life expectancy of a Russian assault trooper is about 12 days.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is convinced that Russia is not interested in developing the occupied areas of Donbass and will use the captured territories only for showpiece actions, under the headline, "We won the war." In addition, the commander-in-chief stated that Ukraine wants to end the war in a just and reliable way.